What's up, guys? Ben and Hippie here with the Hookup Tackle. Today we're going to talk about one of our favorite subjects, and that is walking topwater baits. Now, this time of the year we're kind of approaching the end of summer and we're getting ready to transition into fall. And when we get those cooler nights and those mornings where all of a sudden we have to run in our hoodies or our jackets, what happens is that water temp gets shocked and the bait starts to move up shallow and start their fall migration. And the bass school up and feed really heavy on shad and herring and bluegill and perch and all the beautiful little bait fish in the lake. And it's the best time of the year, basically from the start of that transition all the way until it really starts snapping with cold weather, to get them on walking baits. So today we decided we're just going to systematically break this down to help you guys choose and select the right walking baits for the right conditions. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go, guys. Walking baits basically is just a bait that you are going to impart your own action into, right? So typically that means you're kind of twitching your rod tip so that you're getting the bait to walk side to side. Now, in a tackle store like this, there's a gazillion options, and it can become very overwhelming, especially if you're new to walking baits.
Yeah.
But even if you're not new, like as new options come, how do we choose? Like which ones are better for which conditions, right?
100%. Yeah.
And I think you and me we're pretty much on a similar page with this one. So this should be a good topic for us to kind of break down. And we have a tendency to simplify things more than complicate,
I think once you understand it, it's a pretty simple technique to dial in, you know?
Yeah.
There's not too much that goes into topwater fishing or walking baits.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to basically break this down for you guys how we would do it. Basically our starting point, and then working backwards as far as how we approach looking at walking topwater baits.
Absolutely.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this the starting point for you?
Yeah, that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with our starting point, and that is throwing a Kicknocker. A lot of you guys will know this as a Vixen. Whatever you refer to it is a Kicknocker now. This has been a staple for us. It's really the go-to walking bait when you just need to cover a lot of water. It's a great bait for fishing both shallow and deep water because inside it has one internal knocker that's positioned in the back here that just creates really loud knocks that call fish from all over.
Yeah, great draw power.
Yeah, so you could be fishing in slightly murky water. You could be fishing in open water with fish that are suspended to come up and chase this bait. It's a bait that's going to have a lot of side-to-side glide while it has forward movement. So what that means is as you twitch, the bait is going to walk sideways and forward at the same time. So it's a very easy bait to fish quickly. You can cover a lot of ground. If you're not sure what the fish are doing or where the fish are positioned, you just need to cover a ton of water to find them. This is a very good bait to do that.
When I get to the lake the first couple days of fall and I'm looking for that topwater bite, this is the first one that I grab. Just like Ben said, I can cover a lot of water, it's got great draw power, and I can keep that trolling motor on a high speed and just burn and get enough bites to teach me something, you know, and then elaborate from there and, you know, look at other bait options.
This is the Kicknocker. It comes from Teckel. It's available in a full size as well as a pup size, which is a little junior version of it. They both have the same sound, just a different profile. These are a couple of the custom colors that we do here in-house, a White Walker and Sake Bomber, but we definitely recommend you kind of matching the hatch to your waters and your water clarity. Okay? Up next in our approach is a bait that's very fond to both of our hearts as well. This is the Evergreen Shower Blows, or in the United States as it's known, the SB. Okay? These are the two sizes that we throw, the 105 and the 125. So, Julius, tell me about this. When do you switch from a Kicknocker to the Shower Blows?
So once I've kind of got some fish located and you know, it takes something a little bit extra to get them to commit to the bait. This bait, you can walk it a little bit slower, it's gonna have a little bit wider action, and it's gonna spit a little bit of water. So, I mean, with that being said, it just kind of generates a couple more bites for me. You know, it's something different. Like when everybody starts throwing walking baits, I feel like a Vixen or a Kicknocker is one that everybody generates to. So once I've seen a lot of those, this is my first secondary option once the topwater bite's kind of been there.
Just to give them a different look
100%,
for you.
yeah.
Okay. So this is a style of bait that's known as a pencil popper. And a lot of people get confused when they hear pencil popper
Right.
because they're thinking that it's a popping bait.
Yeah.
But what makes a pencil popper such an amazing walking bait is if you notice the shape of this bait, it starts thin at the head and it gets more bulbous towards the bottom of it. Okay? So it basically has a big back end. And what that big booty does is it moves on itself. So as you walk it and it twitches, that back end is shifting around. And we'll show it to you in the tank and let you see it. But it really allows you to have a longer stroke with the rod to allow it to move out similar to the Kicknocker, or you can tighten up your stroke and just have that back end move on itself to keep that bait in the strike zone for a much longer period of time.
100%. Super versatile.
Yeah, and what I've seen with this guy is when the fish get really on like isolated pieces of structure. Like let's say they're on a big flat and I know they're positioned in bushes or a tree or something like that where, you know, maybe a Kicknocker just moves too fast, right? Too fast away from them. We could switch up to the shower blows and we can, you know, work it fast to the tree and then tighten up our twitches and get it to basically just walk in place very slowly by that bush and by that tree and really drive them crazy to come up and chew.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So definitely one, again, it's gonna have an internal knocker in the back, easy to cast. So it's another great one from Evergreen, the shower blows. All right, moving down our list, the next bait that I throw quite a bit is the Megabass Dog X Diamante. Now, the Diamante is basically the same size, shape, and profile as the Kicknocker and the shower blows, only this bait has a totally different sound. It incorporates a different internal rattle inside. It's got more of a high-pitched noise. So a lot of times I find that when the fish get accustomed to that really loud knock of a Kicknocker or shower blows, I can follow up with a bait like this and I can go behind guys and get some extra bites. It's also a bait that requires a little more oomph on your rod tip as you're twitching the bait, and it pops a little bit in the front. So it creates this little popping sound, it has this rattling sound, and it creates this beautiful bubble trail as it goes. Now, what about you? When are you switching over to, or do you switch over to this dude?
So me, I'm a little bit different. So when I go to the Diamantes, I feel like my bases are covered with the Kicknocker and shower blows. So I believe this bait here has a beautiful walking action, but I choose it when I go to this one is when I want something quiet. So I love the way it walks, I love the action of it, but it's a great bait that you can find in a silent. So when it comes, you know, we have a lot of clear water, so when it comes to getting a few extra bites, I go to this guy because of that silent option.
And there's not a lot of silent, like bigger silent walking baits.
Right.
Just to break it down, when is a smart time to consider going to silent? Like when is that starting to trigger in your head for you, like, oh, you know what, maybe I need to drop to a silent bait now?
So for me is pressure, on the water pressure is the first thing I look at. So whether, you know, there's just a lot of boats on the water, or you fish a pressured place, or there's a tournament going on, you're a tournament guy. So that's my first thing I look for. You know, the first time you grab a topwater bait out of your box, 9 times out of 10 it's gonna have rattles in it or some sort of rattling chamber. It's gonna make a noise, right? After the fish have seen it for so long, you know, 2-3 weeks prior, just like, there's fish are still down there, but you know, not necessarily they're gonna commit to that loud, obnoxious sound. But then this guy comes through there and it's doing that same action, but it's quiet. It encourages them to, you know, get a little more curious and come take a look at it and get you a few extra bites on, you know, a tough day.
And I think that's an important point, is when fish get conditioned to certain baits, certain lures, certain sounds, whatever, the behavior of the fish hasn't necessarily changed. Right? Like it's still end of summer, early fall, the bait's still moving in, they're still feeding on shad, like they're still doing all the same stuff that they were doing before they were conditioned. It's just now they've learned, like, oh, there's that knock again. Right? Like, I'm not even gonna look at it. Right? So just by changing up, like, so I'm changing to the rattle guy for the same reason you're changing to the quiet guy.
Silent,
right? So, you know, just remember that there's no wrong, and there's no like absolute right. You just got to try stuff, experiment with stuff.
Whatever system works for you, you got to kind of roll with it.
And don't be afraid to try something different. You're wrecking them on one bait, you know, during pre-fish. you know, you got a tournament on Saturday and 100 other dudes have been wrecking them,
Yeah.
you know, leading up to it. You have to be open-minded enough to remember, like, all right, dude, let me just try something different or switch up if you feel that the fish are doing something different.
Absolutely. Slight condition changes is a big thing to pay attention to. You know, so if you're catching them on that rattle one really good and, you know, there's been a slight chop all week, and then, you know, come tournament or come whatever day that you're back out fishing and it's bluebird skies, it's sunny, it's hot, and there's not a lick of wind, you know, this is probably a good time to pull out the silent, you know, and continue to chase that topwater bite. Don't just give up because, you know, you were throwing the one that you caught him on before. You know, just don't give up. Like, try other options, and that's when that silent one shines.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that we didn't really talk about in the other two baits previous.
Yeah.
Is that topwater baits don't have to just be for like glass, slick, calm days.
Yeah.
Right? Are you throwing, like, getting back even to the shower blows, the Kicknocker?
Yeah.
Are you throwing this in chop? Are you throwing it in wind? Are you like, what's your threshold for topwater?
I like a little bit of chop. I think like that shower blow shines really good when there's a little bit of chop because it, again, that pencil popper is going to spit a little bit of water and you can kind of manipulate it a little bit better. You can get it to go wide, and then, you know, if whatever, you know, you hit a pocket that's got a little bit more chop than the other, you can make it go tighter across it and kind of skip across that chop and, you know, get your bites.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to throw these things in any condition. You know, a lot of people, I think they just see that, oh, it's calm,
Right.
throw topwater.
Yeah.
And of course we all think that way,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
But a lot of us think like, oh, crap, it's windy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's waves, they're not gonna eat topwater, but those are some of the best days. So yeah, matching the condition that the universe is giving us to the bait we're throwing is really smart.
100%.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And knowing when things come into play. You know, you're not going to have a windy day and pull out your silent bait. You know, it's gotta, you gotta
They need to be able to
understand.
see it and hear it and find it in those conditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We have options for a reason.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me or bridges the gap into the next bait that I love to throw, and I know that you enjoy throwing it as well.
Yeah.
And that's a Lucky Craft Gunfish.
Yeah.
Right? So the two main sizes of gunfish that we throw are the 95 and the 115. Honestly, for me, probably like 90% of the time, it's the 115.
Yeah.
Same
They eat
with
it.
you?
Yeah, that's the one, dude.
So it seems like they eat the 115 just as good as the 95, only this one's so much easier to throw. But, you know, of course, if you're needing to match the profile and downsize and really get finessey, then, you know,
100%.
that's the reason why there is a smaller one.
Absolutely.
I find that the Gunfish is kind of the next step down in chaos on the water.
Right.
Right? So it pops a little bit more. It still has some rattles. It still has some sound, but it's not, I mean, if I hold the hooks in, there's not a ton of noise to this thing. It's finessey with still giving enough volume for a fish that's suspended or deep to draw to it. That's my thought behind it. What are you switching to this guy for?
So I kind of grew up, like, this was my starting point back in the day. Like, we didn't have too many options, you know, and like the Vixen was a good one, but this one, like, when we wanted that, you know, that little bit of pop, like, we didn't have the shower blow back then. So this was our option, and I mean, it dominated. When you wanted to change the profile, and like Ben said, it doesn't have a ton of noise. So, like, not necessarily had to go to a silent, this was our option, you know? So I had a lot of time with this one, and, you know, it was just a staple in my arsenal for years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to note that with all of these, I mean, pretty much all the baits that we've spoken about up to this point is basically some kind of super spook spin-off.
Yeah.
Right? And so the super spook for ages and ages and ages was the bait that we all incorporated when we wanted something loud and moving.
Yeah.
And there are still times when the super spook just crushes. But the super spook, it is designed to sit very flat. So as it moves, it kind of skims the top of the water like this flat.
Yeah.
Whereas a bait like the Gunfish is gonna sit kind of tail down. So as you pop it, it not only moves side to side, but it has a head motion that dives, it pops, it spits. So you're getting these different motions, these different actions, and they're just, the reason why we're choosing these baits is that they're just a lot more universal and versatile, I would say at this point, than some of the older throwback baits. But there's nothing wrong with those baits, and there's still a time where, like, dude, you gotta pull out the super spook.
100%.
But day in, day out, this is a great option when that bite is going, just to kind of give them a different look, right?
And for years, I believed that the way this cup is on the Gunfish, it creates noise. It creates something when you're walking it. It kind of pushes water displacement on the bottom of this slip, and it creates some sort of noise that I think kind of draws them in a little bit. You know, I kind of pay attention to the little things sometimes, and I feel like that actually does do something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So definitely give that a look, guys. The Lucky Craft Gunfish. It's a great one. It's available in tons of colors. So again, you can mix and match your color selection. As you can tell from our selection of baits that we've been showing you so far, the majority of our colors that we go with are pretty natural shad-based colors, right? Bones, whites, matte shad, silver. Because the majority of topwater fishing that we're doing is fish that are based on threadfin shad, gizzard shad. Of course, if we were fishing somewhere where bluegill or perch was the dominant, prey or forage, then we'd be, switching to more of those profile of colors. So, definitely pick the colors that are, relevant to your waters. If you're fishing clear to semi-stained water, any of these more natural bait fish patterns are going to be a good place to start.
Very solid.
All right, moving down the list. Let's get back to those mornings where we get out on the water and it's just glass calm.
Yeah.
And it's still and it's quiet, and maybe you see some little shad ripples happening, but you just you load in the boat and you find yourself being careful, right? And you're you're kind of whispering to your
right.
to your buddy,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to go chucking some big, loud, obnoxious, huge knocking bait. You're going to scare the crap out of everything that's in the lake, right?
Yeah.
So this is when we switch up to some of these more, finessey baits. And I know this is one that you love, so I'm going to let you talk about this, dude.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time on Lake Pleasant, which is a very clear water fishery, and we find ourselves challenged a lot, especially, late spring, when there's a topwater bite, or in the summertime. The bait gets real small and it's pretty much transparent, and on those super slick days, it's really hard to find a bait that's gonna almost make a V. You want the bait to make a V, not necessarily walk too much, and that's where the Sammy comes into play. It'll walk, but it's gonna almost push the water instead of walk across the water, if that makes sense. It's a really good one when they're finicky and they're on that smaller stuff in those tough clear water conditions. That's when I go to the Sammy.
Yeah, and so this is a Sammy 100 made by Lucky Craft.
Yep.
They make several different sizes of Sammy. Is this usually your go-to size, the 100?
The 100 is my starting point. Usually I don't have to change the profile where it's not intimidating and, just little ones eat it, big ones eat it. It's that perfect size on those tougher days when you don't want a lot of commotion.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. And then for me, in the same conditions, I love the Sammy 100 as well, but I generally am gravitating more towards the Giant Dog X in Megabass, which is essentially, if I could see that Sammy 100, so they're just slightly different. The Sammy 100 is going to sit a little bit higher in the water, and the Dog X is going to sit a little bit lower in the water. So the Dog X has a little more commotion, and the Sammy is a little more finesse. Absolutely. I would say, right?
Yeah.
But same idea. These are baits that you can fish slowly. You could get a slow walk to where it's moving and it's imitating the bait fish without a ton of commotion.
Right.
For those conditions where it's just you need to be stealth.
Well, I find myself on a super long cast, I gotta look for my bait, when I'm walking it, because it's literally just barely making a V across the water and it's super subtle, so I'm like, where is that thing?
Right.
But yeah.
Right. So definitely give either of those a look, the Megabass Giant Dog X or Lucky Craft Sammy 100. Both great, finessey, just more stealthy topwater approaches.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then to kind of round out, the walking baits, for me, is a bait that both of us kind of got really big into over the last couple years.
Yeah.
And that's a bait from Megabass. That's the Dog X Quick Walker. Okay? Now, the Quick Walker is a little bit smaller profile than the Sammy 100 and the Giant Dog X. It's 87 millimeters instead of 100, but it's got a totally different look and shape to it. So it's got kind of a finned head, and this bait is designed to move extremely fast, thus the name, the Quick Walker, right? So one of the advantages to this bait is kind of getting back to what you were talking about where like post-spawn, early summer, where they start feeding on small bait, fry, you know, little things. If they're used to eating, you know, 1, 2, 3-inch bait, and all of a sudden you go and you hit them with a 5-inch walking bait that's got this slow, loud knock, they know that's not real. Right?
Yeah.
So you follow up with something like this, and the advantage to this is it does have a little bit of a knock, but it moves so fast, right? And it moves side to side so quickly they never really get a chance to see the profile.
React.
Yeah, so this is a great bait for, again, those kind of conditions similar to what we were talking about with the Sammy. It's pretty slick, pretty calm, but they're really keyed in to small stuff. You can get away with this bait just moving it very, very quickly across the surface, and it just really skims fast, and they choke this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually added into my arsenal fish are schooling, boiling, that kind of stuff. It's a great one, you know, when they, you know, you're just going down the bank or fishing, whatever you're doing, and they come up, I can grab that quick walker, you know, and make a quick cast and just kind of, you know, take advantage of what's going on, and I can fish the bait effectively rather than, you know, trying to walk a bait. I can just really quickly get it in and out, you know, and make 3-4 casts while it's going on, and then, you know, keep going about my business.
Yeah.
But it's super effective when fish come out on a whim. I know that I can put that in there, and it's gonna actually work correctly the way I want it to, and I can work it super fast. Right,
and that's another good point.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of these baits, they have a sweet speed.
Yeah.
Right? And if you try to go too fast, they get all wonky, and then the line gets around the hook, and then they get weird, and then you just threw into a boil of fish and you screwed it up. Right? Whereas this guy's actually designed for that fast movement.
Yeah.
So you can literally just keep twitching, and the thing's
Super
gonna just
erratic.
keep moving, and it's gonna look natural as it comes through.
100%.
Yeah, cool. And then finally, for me, is a little sleeper when size matters, right? This is another little dude from Megabass. This is called a Swing Hot. This is a unique little bait. It's a small pencil popper. And I know you've been digging this thing for your trout escapades, but it's a great one that is a very small profile. It's actually designed for saltwater, but the colors are completely applicable. They're pearl bottoms,
100%.
and it doesn't matter, right? But what's cool about this bait is that even though it's small, and one of the downsides to a small bait is that they have a tendency to get the tiny little hooks in weird places, and then they jump, and there's just not enough hook to really get them.
Yeah.
This guy comes on a swiveled hook keeper. So the hooks are swiveled, so if they get the bait weird, they don't have the leverage of the bait to toss, and so you're gonna land a lot more fish with this guy. It is, again, kind of a true pencil popper. It has that kind of cupped lip and that bulbous back end, so it's gonna move and spit really well as it does.
Yeah.
And you found that you can even catch non-bass species on this.
You can catch non-bass species on it for sure.
Yeah.
I actually had an amazing day. I grabbed a couple when they first came out, and you know, I had a guide trip the next following morning, and the bass were on, the striper and the bass were on fry. You know, and it was hard, you know, we'd catch them on small little swim baits and stuff, but they weren't really committed to it, and I'm like, all right, let's tie those on. And I tied them on, and both clients, boil happens, first cast, boom, double hook up on that thing, like, first day I had it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm
awesome.
Like, okay, I found a sweet spot for that bait.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Again, when they're on small stuff, it shines.
Cool. Cool. So definitely one when, you know, they're getting super picky. Definitely one that's worth taking a look, and that's the Swing Hot from Megabass. All right, so now that we've kind of broken down our baits for you guys, let's just talk really briefly on some accessories that are important to have if you're gonna be throwing a lot of walking baits, and we'll break down the line, the rod, the reel, make sure you have the right stuff for being out on the water. So one of the most important things with any type of bait that you need to move side to side, like a walking bait, is that the front of the bait needs to be on something that allows it to move, some kind of pivot point. So we highly recommend that if your bait doesn't come with a split ring, that you attach one, or if you like to use snaps, snaps are another great option, but you're gonna get much better and easier movement when that bait has a pivot point. So as you move it, it has the opportunity to slide versus you just pulling it straight through the water, okay? So either way is fine. Some guys prefer a split ring, some guys like the ease of a snap. Doesn't matter, just as long as there's something on the front of that bait, because if you try to attach the bait without that rotation, that pivot point up top, you're gonna get frustrated. It's not gonna walk very well, okay? Okay, so let's dive in and talk about some line really quick.
Okay.
So a couple different ways to approach this. I know you're a big fan of throwing it on mono.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So you talk about your lines and what you use.
Yeah, you know, for years I've kind of always been on the hunt for the right, you know, 1-2 punch in mono. I feel like you need to have 2 options, and Sunline does it for me. So in their Defier lines, their original green, you know, this 22 pound is going to have a smaller line diameter. So you can get away with a 22 pound that has a diameter of like a 15 pound. So it gives me more confidence when I'm throwing those bigger topwater baits. I can get away with heavier stuff. Also, the Armillo is starting to become my more go-to. It's going to come off the spool super smooth. It's super comfortable to fish. You know, I've never really had any issues with it. And
Less
you know,
stretch
less
in
stretch.
the Armillo than the regular Defier.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you want it to have more stretch, just go with a straight mono or something like the Defier. Less stretch. It almost gives you that fluorocarbon less stretch with this guy.
With this guy, yeah.
Is there an advantage? Now, you and me have a tendency to overkill our line size, right?
Yeah.
So like we're holding up 19 and 22 pound. A lot of
Yeah.
guys are probably going, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
is there an advantage to going with a lighter line for you versus a heavier line, or vice versa?
Not really. I mean, I've always kind of stuck to that heavier line, and I've been able to get away with it.
Yeah.
And it gives me more confidence too when I throw my walking bait up next to a tree and a 5-pounder blows up on it and it goes up under it.
Yeah.
I've got 22 pound mono. I can pull on them a little bit.
So you're pretty much always in one of these heavier sizes.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't see a reason to go down.
So the only reason, like true reason, if you guys are listening to this, you're like, oh my God, I only throw a topwater on 12 or 14 or whatever.
Yeah.
The lighter the line you go, the more distance you're going to get on your cast. So if you guys are struggling with your cast, chances are it's the wrong rod, okay? But if you're trying to make the combo work that you have, you could go with a lighter line and you should get some extra distance. The heavier the line, the more it's going to float. So in theory, it should help you walk those baits even easier, which is why we usually go with the heavier line.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Another way to think about topwaters, and this is something that we'll do occasionally. I'm kind of in your vote. I like going the straight mono.
Yeah.
Because I think it gives you the most versatility. We will go to a braided line and then go to a fluorocarbon leader from the line to the bait. Now, what the braid will do is we could get away with a 55 or a 60 pound braid. I like the Samurai braid, the J-Braid Grand.
Yeah.
Same
Absolutely.
with you. Yeah, so
Yeah.
both are great. Darwin makes a great braid. But what this will do is it will allow us, when we really need to bomb a cast, you know, as far as we can throw. I mean, if you're throwing one of these baits like a Kicknocker or a Shower Blows, you know, you're throwing that thing forever. I mean, they're weighing 3/4 of an ounce up to an ounce. So if you make the longest cast you can make, and then the fish eats at the end of your cast, sometimes having any stretch at all causes you to miss that fish. So the nice thing about going to a braid is that you get a much more direct contact to that fish. And then we'll just use usually like a 3 or 4 foot, maybe a 5 foot fluorocarbon leader. I usually just go a 20 pound. Now, before you guys panic and go, fluorocarbon, that sinks. It's not at the head of the line sinking that causes the problem. With topwater baits, it's the belly of the line. So the reason we don't throw straight fluorocarbon on a walking bait is that the fluorocarbon, as it starts sinking, the belly of the line, midway between where I am and my bait is pulling the bait down.
And that nose will go down.
Yeah, and then it's just gonna start diving. But if you're throwing braid, something that's floating really high, and you just have a small little liter of fluorocarbon, it's fine. It'll walk just fine, but the fluorocarbon is gonna give you all that abrasion resistance that you need from a leader.
Yeah, it's nice because it's gonna absorb that impact rather than having your straight braid and then ripping those treble hooks right out of the fish's mouth.
Right, so it gives you just that little bit of cushion.
100%.
Yeah, cool. All right, on rods and reels, I think we both pretty much agree on reel 7-to-1.
Yeah, 7-to-1.
Okay, so 7-to-1 seems to be the sweet spot. Sometimes I'll go to a 6-to-1 if I really need to control the speed. Sometimes as you're walking the bait and you're twitching and you're picking up the slack, sometimes if you get really excited, a 7-to-1 could be too fast. But again, the majority of time that I'm catching them on topwater, and probably the same with you, is we're making a really long cast and they tend to eat it far away from the boat, and I just prefer to have them on a 7-to-1.
Absolutely.
Same?
Yeah, clear water difficulties.
Yeah. So as far as rods go, it's been no secret I've been completely enamored by the Destroyer P5 Madbull. This has become my go-to walking bait rod. Of course, if you are in you know, like the Orochi, something like the Extreme Mission Type F or Diablo Spec R could be good, but the Madbull has the perfect action. What we're looking for is we're looking for a rod that has a little bit of bend at the tip, so that as we're twitching, we want that rod to be able to give and bounce back enough to where we're not wearing ourselves out all day. But the rod also needs to bend deep enough in the rod so that if we hook a fish on the outside of the face, that it's forgiving enough to help us get that fish in the boat.
Yep.
So definitely take a look at the Madbull, and then whatever 7-to-1 reel you like. We're throwing Steezes, Metaniums, you know, they fit great on the Madbull, so any of that stuff should be great. All right, guys, so that does it for our breakdown of how to choose a walking bait. Thank you, Hippie, for joining us.
Thanks for having
and
me.
Sharing your insight. We hope that helps. You know, I'm sorry that you had to dive into the mind of Hippie, but there's a lot of great knowledge in there. And so, you know, guys, good luck. If you have any questions, leave us a comment, hit us up on Instagram, holler at us at the shop. But all the baits, there'll be links to everything we talked about, and they're all available here at the Hookup Tackle. So have fun fishing. Peace.
See you guys.
See you guys.